As of Thursday, the few stores in Austin that are open for people to stock up on food and supplies have long lines. The customers who can get inside are finding shelves that look like this. Governor Abbott addressed the statewide food supply shortage just a few hours ago.
One thing that will aid in replenishing those stocks is the fact that the roads are more passable.
And other Texas leaders spoke out about the food supply problem earlier today.
The shelves are bare of any type of dairy products, no eggs. Fruits and vegetables were pretty okay on.
Sid Miller is the commissioner of the Texas Department of Agriculture. He said this storm has devastated the agricultural industry, estimating at least $500 million impact. He also said people will likely feel the effects of that impact in grocery stores for the next few weeks.
Until this is over, we don't know how many dead cattle, how many dead calves. We don't know the overall effect, how much milk we've dumped, how many chickens froze to death.
Low food supply in Texas is also hitting hunger relief charities hard, which is impacting Texans in need. The Central Texas Food Bank has had to cancel food distribution events this week.
Our fleet, our equipment, our facility, our operations have taken a pretty heavy hit with these extremely low temperatures and hazardous road conditions.
President and CEO Derek Chubb says they haven't lost any food so far. He thinks the food bank can make it through next week. But if supply is adversely impacted, like Commissioner Miller said it could be, then it might create problems for Texans in need.
Today and next week, we're good. If you and I are having this conversation a week and a half from now, we could be having a very different conversation.
Governor Abbott recommends Texans who want to help improve the food supply go to this website, www.feedingtexas.org. In Austin, for the KVUE Defenders, I'm Brad Stryker.
When the only constant in life is change, you need to be ready. This is the Man-Made Survival Show.
Hello everyone, my name is Jose Prado with MMS Survival. Thank you so much for coming back to the channel and watching this video. I really do appreciate it because this video, I really do believe it's going to be one of the most important ones that I've actually done this entire year that I've been doing this podcast. So I would really appreciate if you can share this information with your friends and family, because we're going to be talking about what happened in Texas, about 2 weeks ago now. And the reason that it's still relevant is because it has a lot to do with preparedness, of course, because there's a lot of things that happen there. But not only that, it also proves that what I've been teaching you here in this podcast is actually the right way to prepare, because, of course, there's the right way to prepare and there's the wrong way to prepare. And it is my belief that a lot of the things that is being taught, quote unquote, in the prepper community is actually the wrong way to really prepare. So that is the reason why I believe that this information right here is going to be the most important one that I've actually had to share with you this entire year that I've been doing the podcast. So please share this information with your friends and family all throughout your social media so they can get this information as well. Because, what happened in Texas, before, during, and after is giving us a mountain of data that we can actually gather, look at, and prepare accordingly. That's the whole reason and the purpose I do this podcast, to see what's going on in the news, what's going on around the world, bring you the information and prepare accordingly. That's why I think even though there was a lot of despair and a lot of things happening in Texas, it's actually a good thing for us to look at. The events were bad, people passed away. Yes, all that is horrible, but we can learn from that and build upon it. All right, so one of the things, right, the main thing that I teach you in this podcast is that you really have to look at the supply chain, and not the supply chain the way that is, thought of in the mainstream media or anything like that. Because when you ask somebody rather, what is the supply chain, they'll tell you it has to do with food, right? From the time that it's on the ground to all the way where it makes it to the grocery stores. But rather of thinking of the supply chain that way, there's a way that I define it here in MMS Survival. So when you hear me talk about the supply chain, I don't just mean the food, because really the four major things that the supply chain really takes care of is what I believe should be the foundation of everyone's preparedness. Doesn't matter what you're preparing for, whether it's an EMP, a tornado, an invasion, whatever it is, these four things that I teach you should be the foundation of it, all right? Because the prepper community thinks, or actually teaches to new preppers that you should really prepare according to how you feel, what do you feel you're going to need, how you're going to need it, what is the potential thing to happen. And they give a laundry list of things to prepare for and with, what to get on hand. But it's nothing concrete, nothing that you can say that is the foundation. And it doesn't matter who comes along to start preparing for the very first time. That would be the path for them to take. Now, I really do believe that what I'm teaching, every other prepper should be teaching it as well, so we can all have the same information, and everybody who's new will get the same information, will arrive at the same path, or will arrive at the same destination through the same path. But even though I'm very, very small time right now, I really do believe with the perseverance that I'm putting into this podcast and into making this prepper community grow, I do believe we'll eventually get there. As I've said, I have a lot of plans for the prepper community. I hope to do a lot of things that I do believe have never ever come out of the prepper community, and that will help to redefine, preparedness. It will help to really restore the respect that it really does deserve, because what Texas showed us is that, yes, we do have to be prepared, and if more people were prepared, then the casualties that we've seen because of the weather, just simply because it was cold outside, people passed away. All of that would be erased, in a perfect world, but at least we can reduce the casualties of people who were not prepared. That is why in the mission statement I write that I want us to become a refuge for the unprepared. And I really do believe that is possible. So again, going back to what I teach is that you need these four things are the foundation of preparedness. This is the common denominator for anything you may prepare, and that is power, water, food, and medicine. And all four of those were affected during the Texas, winter storm. And the reason that I say that those four are the core four things that you have to prepare, or that should be in your preparedness, is because all four of those give you a service. And those services, if you were to take one away, it will really reduce your standard of living. And that is the reason why those should be the common denominator in your preparedness. Now, of course, there is 14 categories that I teach you here as well. But when you think about what you're preparing for, those four should be at the core of it, right? The other ones could be add-ons. So that is the reality of preparedness and how I teach it here in ManMadeSurvival. Now, what you're seeing on the screen is the 14 categories, right? The ones that are highlighted are the ones that I really want to talk about, because those were the ones that were affected most. And the ones that were not highlighted were also affected, but not in a great deal. But I do want to touch on those real quick. So the first two, alliance and plan, those two go out the window real quick, because even though people knew what was going to happen, because, now we have technology, there's the Weather Channel, local news, Facebook, Instagram, and everybody else was talking about the winter storm that was going to come through. What I believe, because of what I've read in the articles and quotes from people, is that they did not believe that it was going to be as harsh as it was. So I really do think that they believed that, it was going to get cold and it was going to snow. They were going to play in the snow, have a good time, create memories, and that was going to be it. But that is not what reality, that was not the reality of the situation. So alliance and plan went out the window. Nobody took it serious, so that went out. Medical also went out the window, because even though the hospitals were open, the roads were impassable and the communication was not working. So people couldn't even call 911 to get anybody in the ambulance and take them to the hospital. So that also went out the window, right? And that's one of the core ones that was affected. And because nobody could get there, even if they wanted to, the great deal of damage was there. The next one is tactical. Now, tactical it wasn't really needed this time, because it was really cold. All the criminals and everybody else, they ain't gonna go anywhere when it's freezing outside. The pipes in their house have busted, and there's no food and water anywhere. So that criminality wasn't gonna really go anywhere. But however, if the power would have gone out as long as they said it was going to, then it would have really, tactical would have been one of the main things that would have been out there that people would have to really focus on, because then that's when the criminality would have been rampant. If the power would have been out for months like they warned, after everything thawed out and people were looking for food and water, then things could have gotten very dicey, but good thing they didn't. All right. The next one is survival training. In this case, survival training wasn't really needed that much. However, people could have created a shelter outside and stuff like that, but why would you do that when your house is right there behind you? The thing with the problem here was the heating of the home. Now, if you had a fireplace, then you could have started a fire with books, even your dresser. But for people who didn't have or don't have a fireplace, then you could have started a fire in a different way that would have also been safe. But people didn't think about that because they have never thought about those situations. So that's the reason why survival training went out the window. Bug out bag and bug out vehicle. All right. So there were reports of people walking home from their cars, and if I'm not mistaken, a few of them died in the freezing cold. So if they would have had their vehicle properly stocked up with food, water, and something warm for cold weather, then there's the chance that they might have survived. And with the bug out bags, if they would have had their sleeping bag, extra clothing, ways to make fire, all of that would have been useful in that situation. But nobody had a bug out bag, so I believe that's the reason why their chances of survival were a lot less than they would have been if they would have had a bug out bag and their vehicle stocked up. And the last one is hygiene. This only lasted a few days. It's really cold, so not like anybody wanted to take a shower, or they were doing any activities that would have made them sweat and get dirty and stuff like that. But during the summer, that would have been a big deal, because then now you're sweating and all that, cuts can get infected and stuff like that. So something that we have seen from other countries like Venezuela and, South America, other places where people don't have a proper hygiene, diseases come around. That is the reason why that's one of the categories that you have to take care of in your preparedness. All right, so all 14 of this, they're divided into sections like this because that's what you have to take care of. But remember, you want to start with the alliance. The alliance will let you know how much food, how much water you're gonna need, how many medical instruments and everything like that you're gonna need, tactical, how many guns, how many bullets. So all of this is supposed to be divided into families that are gonna be in your alliance. So if you have 14 families, or technically 12 families, then you can actually take care of all of this. And if you have more than 12, then these get divided, and then more can get done the more people you have. And when you do all of this correctly, then you would have a prepper force, or a prepper community, a prepper alliance that would be very, very strong, that more than likely could survive anything that comes their way. So that is the reason why. And you can always reach a goal where you can actually stop prepping because you got everything you need. And we're gonna get into a great detail of that here in just a minute. But even if, all right, like I've always said, preparedness gets split into two groups of people. One, people have plenty of money where they can take care of all of these expenses quickly and they can have everything in place, and the people who do not. So the people who do not, you can take baby steps on each individual one if you don't have an alliance, which of course I'd recommend. But if, let's say you didn't, right? You and your spouse and your children were the only ones in the alliance. You can take baby steps on each individual one and reach a goal. For example, food, right? You need 6 months worth of food. You reach that goal, then you move into water. And then you reach a goal, and then you move into medical, and then you reach the goal, and so on and so forth, until you come back around to food, and then you add to that. So that is the way that you can do this. Baby steps. You don't have to feel like you have to be prepared tomorrow, because it has been 20 years since the last terrorist attack. It has been 13 years since the last financial collapse. There has been a long time of space in between the last disaster and the next, to where you can actually prepare properly and not have to worry so much about it. Now, do we know in the future when something is going to come along and happen again? We don't know. For example, what happened in Texas, it could turn to be something seasonal, right? I mean, it is a belief out there that we're about to go into a mini ice age. So if this happened this winter, we can expect it the next winter. So you have less amount of time to prepare for that, but it would be a lot easier because now you're aware of it and you're expecting it. There's other things that are pretty much projected to happen in the next few years. For example, the World Economic Forum has come out and said that they want to, make sure that the United States is no longer a superpower and only a handful of nations are leading the world. Or, we can, what I've been reporting with the economic collapse, I mean, the dollar is eventually going to collapse. And there's a lot of people who are doing, or who are giving warnings and signals. And this is people within the government. This is people within that type of world. They're giving that warning, right? But do we know exactly when? No, we don't know. In my estimate, it could be anywhere between 3 to 5 years. It's the same thing for war with China, which is one of the main subjects that I talk about in this podcast. So even though we don't know exactly when something is going to happen, we can kind of see what's going on in the headlines and kind of, give ourselves a timeline where we could actually see something go down fast. So you still have time, take the baby steps, and you can only prepare until you prepare, right? Whatever it is that you have when crap hits the fan, then you're just going to have to make the best of it. But you have to take the baby steps today. If you have plenty of money to where you can, just buy everything you need, then that's great. But I want to remind you that you need to get everything you need. You need to make the first investment into the basic things that you need, but then you have to shift your thinking into what can I produce. Because yes, you have to have food stocked up. That's an expense. You need to have water filter. That's an expense. You need to have all these things. There will be expenses. But once you have the basics in place, then you need to start thinking, how can I recreate these without having to go to the store? All right. So with this cold in Texas, it's not something that has been happening just here in the United States. This actually is happening all throughout the world. And I have two videos for you here, and I have a headline. And the reason that I want to mention that before I get into the entirety of this podcast is because I need you to understand that this is not just a local phenomenon. This is going all around the world, and it's going to have its own repercussions later on. Right? That is the reason why I do this podcast, because I look into the news, I bring you what's going on, and then we can make a plan on how to prepare for it. What is being forecasted is going to happen in the future. So that is the reason why I want to do this. Now, before I continue, I just remembered this podcast is going to be a long podcast, okay? And I don't like timing myself to just restrict myself into an hour, because then I feel like I'm restricting you from the information. So for the people who have been here a while now, who, you've listened to my podcast every day, you already know that I'm going to do this. I'm going to talk freely until I'm done. And then when I start editing the video, if it gets over an hour, I'm just going to split it in half. All right. So be watching out for that. But I do it in a way where the first video makes sense by itself and the second video makes sense by itself. But, together you get the bigger picture. So that's what's going to happen in this podcast as well. But anyways, going back into the headline. The headline that I have for you is from strangesounds.org, and the headline says, "It's so cold in Kazakhstan right now that animals are freezing to death. Videos and picture." All right, and this article was written January 21st, 2020. And even though it's, over a month old by now, the same thing is happening in other places very recently. So what you're seeing in front of you right now, right, it's a sheep in the middle of the field. And I'm guessing he's a farmer or whatever. So he's out there, he's looking at the sheep, and it's just frozen solid, not moving or anything like that. Now, when he takes a closer look, the sheep doesn't move or anything. It makes you believe that maybe this is fake. Now, he kicks it over, and it just rocks there back and forth. And it makes you like, I don't know, if it's just a weird feeling when you see an animal just freeze to death like that. If you ever seen the movie The Day After Tomorrow, it's kind of like that scene where the helicopter's flying and then, you know, everything gets frozen, and even the people inside, you know, they're just frozen in the time. I mean, it kind of looks like what happened here. Now, going back into the video, you see the two dogs. One looks like he just ran and he suddenly froze into place, which is really creepy. And the other one, there it is. And then there's the other one also frozen in place, and it looks like he has a rat that was trying to get warm. Now, are these videos real? I believe they might be real, because, you know, you can also get a stuffed animal and just put it out there, you know, kind of like the type that they have at Bass Pro Shop. But, you know, what would be the purpose of doing that, you know? So the next video that I have, which is also the same video within the article, it's two people trying to get a rabbit out of a fence. And, you know, they're pulling, tugging, and then when he finally brings it out, the rabbit is completely frozen. And you'd think that this rabbit is, or the rabbits are going to be strong enough to be in that type of weather without freezing to death, but I guess this was not the case. All right, so why am I bringing this up? Because if this is going to be something that we're going to be seeing in the future, you need to get prepared to be able to warm up your house. That's the first thing that we learned in Texas. So if you do not have a property, or you don't have a house that has a furnace in it, or it has, you know, a wood burning stove, it has a fireplace, you know, something that is going to get your house warmed up when something like this happens, then you need to do that right now. You know, there's gas fireplaces, or there's people with gas fireplaces that may not have the money to refill it with gas. You can actually replace it to have a wood burning stove, and it'll work just as fine. So those are the steps that you have to look now for the next winter, because if this happens again and you don't prepare, for one, you're going to kick yourself, but two, you know that this is coming, and you should be prepared for it. All right, so Japan, Greece, Syria, they also saw snow. I'm going by memory, but I can't remember another country that also saw a blizzard when they haven't seen one in like 15, 20 years. So again, this is not a local phenomenon. Now, here in the United States, we're about to go into spring, right? We're about 20 to 30 days away from going to spring. That means that the southern hemisphere is going to be going into winter, and we can look at their reports how bad their winter is going to be, because that's exactly what we did last year. If you remember, I reported how, I think it was Madagascar and other places, they were having record snow. Argentina had record snow, other places had record snow, and that affected their agriculture, which is one of the things that really affected Texas. But before we get into the food, I want to talk about the water. All right, I have a video for you from Fox 59 News on YouTube. All right, and pay very close attention to all the details that they say on the video, because it's really showing you how people in Texas could have taken certain steps to make sure they were prepared and better off than all the 14 million people plus that were not prepared. All right, here's that video.
And after a long week of freezing cold weather and widespread power outages, Texas is now dealing with a major water shortage.
I probably have like 100 units of water, so if you're standing this far back in line, you're probably not going to get any. All right, because there's 500 people in front of y'all.
As Grady Trimble reports this morning, the federal government is sending help, but for many Texans, it just can't come soon enough.
Everybody's asking the same question, when is the water going to come? The only thing I can say is, I don't know.
Power is back on for most of Texas, but the state is now dealing with another crisis, lack of clean drinking water. About 13 million Texans are under boil water notices as the Lone Star State recovers from a deadly winter storm. With no firm timeline on when water will be restored, water distribution sites are opening up in Austin, Houston, and other major cities.
We do think there need to be more locations across the state at the local level and the state level of where resources are staged or stored before the event.
Help is coming from all corners of the country. President Biden partially approved the governor's request for a major disaster declaration, allowing assistance in 77 of the state's 254 counties. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York volunteered at a food bank in Houston after raising more than $3 million for relief efforts.
When disaster strikes, this is not just an issue for Texans, this is an issue for our entire country. And our whole country needs to come and rally together behind the needs of Texans all across the state.
Meanwhile, questions are mounting over the statewide power failure. The Texas Attorney General is launching an investigation into ERCOT, which operates the state's electrical grid, and other power companies. The president says he may travel to Texas next week, but he doesn't want his presence to distract from relief efforts like these. In Fort Worth, Brady Trimble, Fox News.
All right, so that video is really, really important because it proves that what I've been teaching you about water is actually correct, right? So one of the main things that I teach you here is that you're going to have water stocked up at home at all times. The next thing is that you're going to have a water catchment system, but you have to make sure it's legal in your state because there's a handful of states who do not allow water to be collected, by their residents, which to me is kind of crazy, but, you have to look into it because the fines are pretty hefty if they catch you. You're gonna have to have a pond in your property, or the next thing is to have running water through it all the time. Have a stream, a river, a creek, whatever it is, but it has to have water running through it year round because that's the water, or that's the place where you're gonna be drawing water from when you really need it. Now, people in Texas, they wish they had that type of property right now because they could just go either into their stocks of water and get it, and use it. Or they could use the water catchment system, they can use the pond, or they can use a creek, river, or whatever it is. Now, what you're seeing now on your screen is a property that's being sold close to where I live. And this is 40 acres. And I really, really wish I had the money for it, but I don't. I really like the property. But the point is that you need to look for something like this. Now, if you live in the city, if you live in the suburbs, or even if you live in the rural area that doesn't have water running through it, you should really consider moving away from the city, away from the suburbs, or from your home in a rural area, and moving to a property that will have water running through it all the time, that will have trees in it, because that's our natural resources, and you're gonna have plenty of space for privacy. And that's what you look for in a property. And the good thing about this one, as you see now on the screen, is that it has this big creek, this big river running through it. And this one has water through it year round. That's one of the things that I like it. But, they're selling this property $4,000 an acre, and it's 40 acres. And when I did the math, it came out to be something like $186,000. And, I can only afford that in my dreams. So to me, that was something that I couldn't reach. I did talk to them to see if they wanted to, to divide it, but they didn't want to. They wanted to sell it as a whole. So that is the type of property that you want, all right? If you're going to move, if you have the ability to move from your apartment, or you're thinking about buying a house or anything like that, make sure that it's at the very least 5 acres. The reason that you want it to be more than five or more, is because, for one, it'll give you enough space for you and your alliance. All right, for everybody to move in, and you can put out little houses out there. You can put another house or two there. But not only that, it's going to give you enough space for your garden, and it's going to give you enough space for your animals, and it's enough space to store all of your preps. That is the reason why you want to have a good bit of land, at the very least 5 acres, and then you can have all your preparedness in place for when crap hits the fan. It's going to be a lot easier, all right? Because what I teach you here, another thing, is that you have to come together with your alliance, okay? And all of you together thinking who is going to be the person's house that everybody's going to go to when crap hits the fan, then that's the property that you get prepared. Now, for you, it could be your bug-in location. For them, it would be their bug-out location. But let's say that everybody in your alliance lives in the city, downtown New York, or some populated area. Then you would have to look out in the country, somewhere rural, where you can buy the piece of land and then start preparing it for when crap hits the fan, and then everybody just goes there. All right, that's the way that you want to really set up your bug out location, even if it's your location. All right. Now let's go ahead and move into food. because food is really, really important. Now, in the grocery stores, right, what's the first thing that flew off the shelves? Food and water. Water more importantly, because all the pipes were bursting and everything, and people did not have enough. Oh, and I just remember, before I move on to food, you want to have filtration. A filtration system that is either gravity fed, because that way it doesn't need any electricity or any special gadget. You can just pour the water on top, filter through. That's the kind of system you want. Or you can have, like the bottle that's behind me, or a straw. All right, the ones that I recommend is live straw and the Berkey system, the gravity system. Yes, the Berkey is kind of expensive, right? Just for the system is about $278 plus tax, and the filter is $120 for a pair of two. Now, that is expensive. I'm not gonna lie, but that is the type of purchase that you make once, and it's gonna last you for a very long time. You can either use it every day, or you can save it for when you actually need it, like people in Texas did. That's the type of prep that you can buy once, store it up, but you have to make sure that the filters are replaced or used before their expiration date, because they also get brittle and then they don't work and stuff like that, and you have to replace them, okay? So you have to make sure that you have that in place. The ones that I sell in the store, the MMSSurvivalStore.com, is the bottle that's behind me, which I'm showing you a picture of it now, and the live straw. Both of those will filter out 99.9999% of bacteria and other stuff. It says so in the package, and they're really good. So, and those are the ones that I sell. So, full disclosure, that's why I recommend them. But the point is that even if you don't buy it from the MMS Survival store, get a system like it. The Sawyer Mini is one of them as well. There's other systems out there. There's other filters out there. It's not the only ones in the business, but you have to have at least one, preferably one of the big ones, and one individual one for each family member, or for everybody in the alliance. But just take those baby steps. That's what you need in the time of need. All right, so now moving into food now. All right, so there's a lot of things happening to the food supply chain as far as the food is concerned, where we have China buying a bunch of food head over fist because they're going through a difficult time. Diseases have attacked or have affected their swine in China, and that's the reason why they're buying everywhere else. There's countries south of the border, Central America and South America, who are experiencing drought, and they're experiencing other weather events to where it's really causing them to have food shortages. And some of those countries are starting to ban exports again. So that's, of course, raising the prices of all the food, all the commodities. And now with this weather, that is affecting different places around the world, it's affecting the agricultural. That's one of the main things that we're going to be talking about here, that came out of Texas. All right, so I have a video for you, and it's from valleycentral.com, and the headline is, "It's falling apart. Up to 95% of RGV vegetable crops are gone," farmers say. And pay very close attention to the video, because there's a lot of details in that will really blow your mind, all right? And we'll talk about them when I come back. Here it is.
Thanks, Andrew. We told you last week about the incredible damage to citrus crops from last week's Arctic blast. Now it's vegetables. CBS 4's Mike Jimenez found of the 40 different veggie crops grown here in the valley, only 3 are expected to survive.
It's down, it's beat, it's withered, it's fallen apart.
After a week of freezing temperatures, valley vegetable farmers are assessing the damage.
It's going to be a tough decision for them to decide, do they go in and try to salvage a little bit, or do they just put it all to plow?
Farmers say it's too late to replant most crops, so they're looking at a second straight spring where they're unable to harvest.
Economic upstream impact, and that's going to be all the jobs for folks that are going to be lost. So with Texas farmers not having another, 6 to 9 weeks left in their season, what do they do with all those farm workers? What do they do with all the people that work at the sheds that pack and load trucks? What do they do with all their sales entities, the accounting staff?
Over at Little Bear Produce in Edinburgh, where they grow, pack, and ship produce, it's normally peak season. But now they are plowing over damaged crops. say more than 700 jobs are now in jeopardy.
Those folks are suffering too through this time because now the work has dried up, and that's their livelihood, and that's how they put food on the table and pay their bills, and this hurts everybody in the community.
Erickson says they'll begin replanting what they can.
Ultimately, Mother Nature is the one that's going to dictate whether or not you've had a successful season or not. But we're resilient, and we'll most certainly be back stronger.
The loss just doesn't hit farmers, it hits you too.
As a consumer, you can expect that your fruits and vegetables are probably going to be a little more expensive over the next 6 to 8 weeks, especially until we have supply from the next growing region.
Working for you in Edinburgh, I'm Mike MMS.
Farmers say they are still assessing the total economic damage to vegetable crops because of the recent winter storm.
One of the most important videos that I've shown you so far, because there's several things that was in there that I hopefully you perked up and you pay close attention to, because the first one was that out of 40 different crops, about 3 of them are the ones who are going to survive. Okay, and that should really be concerning. The next thing is that they said that this was their second spring without any crops that they could, harvest. Also another red flag. All right, so those, just by going by those two, he did say that the prices were going to go up. Now, I'm not sure if he meant locally in Texas, or if they're export to different states, then the prices will go up. But the point is that you need to make sure that you can absorb, or you can offset the expenses of all this food going up because of these natural disasters, because of export bans, China overbuying crops and stuff like that. Those are the things that you really have to look into, you have to pay attention to, and take the steps to make sure that you have enough food stocked up, and not only that, for you to have a plan for you to replenish yourself. Okay, so here's the next preparedness part of this that I tell you, or that I teach you in this podcast, that is proven to be right. Now, in the grocery stores, everything flew off the shelf. Everything. Okay? And there was only a handful of things that was left on there. Like you saw in the beginning of this video, how I opened this podcast, is that people were lined up for hours, right? Just to come inside the store to not find anything they could get. And if you already had food stocked up at home, you had your grains, you had canned goods and stuff like that, then even if you didn't find anything in the store, you would have food for you to eat. And even if you didn't have power, let's say you were blindsided by the power and you didn't have a way to heat it up, then the canned goods, most of them, or technically all of them, are good enough to eat off of it, even if it's cold. Of course, it's more pleasant to eat it when it's warm than for it to be, freezing cold. But when you're really in a situation when it's, when you need it in a pinch, you're going to eat it and you're going to be just fine. But when you have all these systems already in place to where you can actually cook your food, then it's going to be better for you, because you're going to have a warm meal in your belly. Now, for preparedness with food, we're about to go into the spring here in the United States, right? We're about 20 to 30 days away, and you really have to think about what are you going to do as far as food is concerned in your garden. We're about to go into the time where we're going to have to sprout seeds, and we're going to have to transplant them into the ground. I think that's the right term. But anyways, we're going to have to plant them in the ground and watch it grow. And it'll be about 100 days, depending on what the crop is, until you have produce from that. In the meantime, if crop has to hit the fan, you have to survive of what you stocked up. And then once your produce came about and you could actually pick it and, use it in your kitchen, then that is only going to fortify whatever you already had. Because let's say you stocked up on your grains and survival food and stuff like that, and you have your farm animals at home, and, you have your chickens, you have your rabbits, sheep, everything like that. When you combine all of those, then you're going to have a more nutritious meal that you're not going to get tired of. Because one of the major concerns in the prep community is that if you're stocked up on the same thing, that you're going to be eating the same thing every day to the point where you get tired of it, and then you rather die than eat anything else, right? That's something that somebody in the comment section pointed out to me once. But when you have a system where you grow your own food, you have your own animals, and you use what you stocked up to kind of like, complement what you grew, then it's going to be better. Now, of course, you only want to use what you stocked up when you have crop failure, when your animals are dead. That's when you really want to use the stuff that you stocked up, because that's going to be your safety net, because you're taking the steps for you to recreate or to replenish yourself. And if you have crop failure because you had never had a garden, there's a pest coming through, like the locusts in the Middle East and in South Africa or in Africa right now. And so they come through and they devour everything, but then you can fall back on what you stocked up on. All right, do not use your stocks. Now, the next headline that I have for you is really important, and the reason that I picked this one out of all the thousands of articles that came out is because it has certain quotes in here that I really do believe you need to pay attention to. All right, so the article's title is Widespread Power Outages, Icy Conditions Hobble Food Supplies. This is from apnews.com. A series of winter storms and widespread power outages gripping Texas and other states not used to such extreme low temperatures are creating big challenges in the nation's food supply networks. The power outages have caught plenty of people unprepared, like John Riley, who says he always keeps a month's supply of canned food on hand for hurricanes. Quote, "We thought it was going to be cold. We did not expect not to have power for a week," end quote. Rodney Giles, 35, of the Woodlands, Texas, went out to get steak to grill for his family on Tuesday, but he ended up waiting in line for 2 hours outside his local H-E-B. When he got inside, the only things available were tofu, oat milk, and other things he did not want. But after living through several hurricanes and pandemic, he hopes the store stocks will improve soon. Quote, "Even during the pandemic here in March, the first day the shelves were empty, but the next day they were fully stocked," Giles said. All right, so I have a question for Mr. Giles there. What if the last time you saw the store shelf stocked up, that was the last time ever? Let's say that something like this happened and then an EMP happened after that. Or let's say that this happened and then we got a nuclear explosion, pretty much freezing the entire supply chain. What if that was the last time this person, Mr. Giles, saw the supply or, saw the grocery stores stocked up? What would millions of people do then? All right, that's where the danger comes in. Because that's when we get millions of people freaking out to the point where they start getting violent and they start looking for resources somewhere else that is not the store. For example, at your home. So this is the reason why we have to make sure that we create a culture of preparedness here in the United States, because we're heading into very difficult times. If we do have an economic collapse, the dollar value goes to zero, and we have hyperinflation here in the United States, which is going to be the next podcast, by the way, then we really have to understand that we have to transition our way of thinking in preparedness from the one event to living out preparedness. Right? We have to make sure that it becomes a way of life, not just the event we're waiting for. Because in Venezuela, they did not expect it, and they've been in it for several years. Now, granted, the U.S. sanctions is one of the things that is really hurting them, and they have not, gotten away from hyperinflation. But the point is that they have lived it for years. Any preppers in Venezuela, if there were any at all, and I know there were a few, but they outlived, the disaster outlived their preps. That is the reason why we have to make sure that we shift from stocking up for that one day, for that one event that's going to get us through, to producing your own stuff, to really understanding that is going to be the way of life from that point on, right? That's one of the things that many preppers and many other people cannot get in their minds. The article goes on to say, meanwhile, food suppliers are having to scale back their operations or close down farms and plants because of the outages. Texas Agriculture Commissioner Sid Miller issued a red alert earlier this week, noting he's getting calls from farmers and ranchers across the state reporting that the interruptions in electricity and natural gas are having a devastating effect on their operations. In just one example, dairy operations are dumping $8 million worth of milk down the drain every single day because the plants that process the milk don't have power, Miller cited in his statement. Quote, "We're looking at a food supply chain problem like we've never seen before, even with COVID-19, end quote. The supply problems have extended to food banks, hampering their ability to feed those most in need. Celia Cole, the CEO of Hunger Relief Organization Feed in Texas, said most of the 21 food banks the organization runs across the state have been closed due to the weather, power issues, or people being unable to come into work. But several have been providing food to warming stations in more urban areas of the state. Quote, "I don't think that there's a single community that hasn't been touched," she said. "The biggest challenge we're facing in terms of being able to help people is the supply chain disruptions," end quote. All right, so one of the things that I was really warning in this podcast a few months back, technically by now, it's about 8 months back, when Feed in America came out, they said that this year, 2021, if things continue all through 2020, which they did, the way they did, that by this year they were going to have, I believe it was 1 billion meals short, and they were going to run out of money. That's what they said. I remember reporting on that. All right, you can go back and check it. The point is that that's millions of people who really depend on the supply chain, and once the food banks are taken off the picture, that's when we're going to see a lot of panic and a lot of chaos in all those people who depend on it. All right, if they're already looking, and I'm not making fun of them, I'm not criticizing them or anything like that, I'm just pointing out the facts that when people like that are so dependent on the system, on the food supply chain, on food stamps, on, food banks and stuff like that, once all of those are taken away, that's where we're going to see the desperation coming out of people, we're going to see the violence coming out of people, and we're going to see the despair coming out of people. All right, we're going to see a lot of people go hungry, a lot of children. And that is the reason why we have to step in and make sure that if something like that happens in your area, all right, and you are able to have a garden and feed your entire community, you should do that. Because in the prepper community, we have always been taught that you have to be selfish. That if somebody comes at your door and they start asking for food, you just turn them away because, because they didn't get prepared and you did. And if they try to do anything, you just blast them off with your shotgun. That is the type of attitude that I want to get rid of, at the very least, in this community, under the ManMadeSurvival flag. We are going to help people as much as we can. All right. If my community where I live, where my physical address is, if I know there's people in my community who are going to be starving, especially children, I'm going to make my garden a lot bigger and make sure that I can grow things. Hopefully that would happen during the growing season. That way I can give all that produce to a local church so they can help them out. The best thing to do in something like this, to have the Christian message and be that type of leader when something like this happens, when a lot of people are going to be confused, a lot of people are not going to know what to do. We have to step in and be the leader, especially if we were well prepared. All right, which is exactly what I'm trying to do here in this podcast. Remember, the mission has changed. The mission of the ManMadeSurvival community is that we're gonna restore we're gonna redefine the prepper community. We're gonna restore the reputation of the prepper community, and we're gonna become a refuge for the unprepared. Of course, not politically motivated, but all united under Christ. That is the goal. That is the mission of this. So I really need you to get behind me. I really need you to support me. If you cannot do it monetarily, just do it by simply sharing this podcast. That is the only thing we need. And by subscribing to the channel, because I get a lot more views than I have subscribers, and not only on YouTube, but on all the other podcasts and platforms, like Brighteon, Speaker, and all those. So I would really appreciate it if you cannot help me monetarily. Just subscribe to the channel. It doesn't cost you anything. All you have to do is just one click, and that would be it. So I would really appreciate it if you could do that for me. Now, what I've been saying, right, about being a leader in the community when people are very desperate for food, was pretty much shown in Portland last week or the week before with this headline that I have for you from Zero Hedge. America 2021, cops block hungry Portlanders scrambling for discarded food. Like I mentioned, that's from Zero Hedge. In northeastern Portland, Fred Meyer's hypermarket threw out thousands of perishable items on Tuesday because it suffered power loss due to a winter storm. Images of food quickly spread on social media as working port folks stormed the dumpster. Shortly after, a store manager called the cops, which prevented hungry people from taking the free food. Working poor Portlanders stormed the massive dumpsters on Tuesday for hopes of free food. They found a mountain of cheese and meats and juice and all sorts of food snacks, all food stacked to the brim of the dumpster. All right, so that to me is very, very unfortunate, because people should not be that hungry, or they should not see the opportunity that they see on the dumpster and just die for it. All right, that is something that is only seen in third world countries. And quite frankly, Portland, of all places, has become a third world country, and the United States is headed to that direction. You know, those are the things that you see in my country. You see people in Mexico dumpster diving for food that's already spoiled for them to eat it. And there's a lot of safety systems, or, a lot of safety nets in this country that should not happen. So I'm not condemning the people of Portland, but that should be a red flag indicator for you. Do not fall into the same trap. Do not, don't do nothing to where later on it's going to cost you everything. Don't put yourself and your family and your kids in a position to where you're going to have to go dumpster diving for food. You can take the steps right now for you to have everything you need in order for you to prepare it. Now, I'm going to be talking about the kind of chickens that I have in my house, because I really do think that everyone in this podcast listening to this should start having their own chickens, their own livestock at home, because there's several things that you learn only by experiencing it, not so much for reading about it or listening to it about it. So what I'm gonna do is right now I'm gonna go get my, the chickens that I have, and I'm gonna kind of do like a show and tell, bringing them one by one. Originally, when I did this podcast last week, I had pictures, but I decided to bring in the live chicken in here because I have to talk about each individual one. All right. So this is where this is going to be edited. I'll be right back. All right, so I'm back with my show and tell. Okay, the first hen, or the first chicken that I have for you, to show you, is the Plymouth Rock. And this one, even though it hasn't put out any eggs, it has a really good environment. My chicken's free range because it's a lot healthier for them to free range than trying to, try just to keep them caged and stuff like that. They can roam around, they can get the insects and the worms and stuff like that. But when this chicken, if it doesn't put eggs by this coming summer, or spring and summer, when I get more chicks to put into my coop, then I'm gonna have to process it. And this is the one that's gonna feed my family. All right. So these ones are pretty good. All right. I had another two of them, but they were killed by hawks. It's another thing that you have to make sure that you take care of when you're taking care of your chickens. But like I said, you learn by experience, more than what I can tell you here. And what you can read in a book, when you actually raise them, that's when you learn different things. And so yeah, this is the first one. Now, I'm gonna put her down. This one is my champion egg layer, egg layer. Easy there. Woo! Wait, let me get that. There you go. Woo! All right, so again, this one is my champion egg layer. This one has 3 sisters, or 2 more sisters, and they're the ones that lay my eggs the most. All right. And so this breed is in my experience, right? All this is my experience. In my experience, this one is the best one. They don't get sick very often. They eat pretty good. They like to free range a lot, and the eggs are very, very healthy. And the eggs are large eggs, and sometimes they get double yolk in them. You know, it depends on, I guess, how she feels. But when spring comes around and I get more chicks, I'm gonna get this breed because this one has proven to be the one that that lays the most eggs. Okay, so when I get more chickens, this is gonna stay. All right, this one is about a year old almost because I did get them in middle of March. So a year old, doing a great job laying eggs, and when more chicks comes around, this one's gonna be taking the lead. All right, so I'll be right back. I'm gonna go get the other two breeds that I have. All right, so the next one in the lineup here, this is the Leghorn chicken. Okay, now these are very good at laying eggs. This one and the brown one are the best one, but the brown one is better than they are. Okay, I had more of them and they lay less eggs than the three of those chickens combined. So the red ones are my #1 choice when it comes to the breeds. Now this one lays eggs, and the rooster, the male of these, it does really good job at fertilizing the eggs, if you know what I mean. So if you want to get this breed, just know that the meat is not that big. You know, they're very small compared to the other breed that I'm about to show you, but the eggs are really good. They're also very nutritious. They're really good eggs, and they're a good size egg as well. You know, they're also large, but more like medium to large, more medium than large most of the time. So this is the other breed that I have. Now I want to remind you that I got them last summer, so all of these are about a year old. Okay, and the reason that I did it this way is because I wanted to experiment rather with all the breeds to see which one was the best. Now what I've done this year is that I've identified which ones I'm going to get. So it's going to be the brown, and it's going to be the next one that I'm going to show you, because the next one is going to be my meat chicken, and the brown ones and the rest of these, they're going to stay alive. But when I get more chickens, they're going to be the brown ones, and they're going to be my egg chickens. All right, so I'm about to get the other one. I'll be right back. All right, so here's the last breed that I have, and you're gonna see why. These are my meat chickens. All right, just look how massive they are. And this one is the male, as you can tell, right, by the crest and everything. Or this is the rooster, and the breed is called Breeze. I think I'm saying it right. I'm not 100% sure. Let me open my laptop back up again. And these are the ones that I'm gonna use for my meat to feed my alliance. And the female version of them, they don't do very good laying eggs, not at all. I haven't had very many coming from them, and even though they do, you know, get on top of the chick or the hens to fertilize the eggs, there's a danger that comes with this one. So this is my experience with this breed. All right, as you can tell, the male is massive, right? He is really freaking huge. But with its talons, what they have done is that they have actually sliced open the females, and I had to put 2 down because I did not realize that this one had done that, and it sliced the flesh open. It got infected, and you know, I had to put it out of its misery. So in the future, what I'm gonna do is that when I look, or when I get more of this breed, if they don't start reproducing properly and I have to get more, if I get any males in the litter, or I think that's the right term, when I get more males, those are the ones that I'm gonna process earlier on before they get this big, and they're gonna go in the freezer, because the females get about this big, you know, just a little bit smaller, but they're really good for meat. We processed one of these when we needed one, and just out of the breast, put you down. Just out of the breast alone, it fed 6 people, no problem, and we still had, you know, chicken left over. So it's really beneficial for you to have your own chickens at home. It's not expensive at all. All right, a bag of feed, which is mainly corn, because I let them free range and they get plenty of other stuff in the field. It costs $9.99 at the Tractor Supply store. $9.99, and it's 50 pounds. So I buy 300 pounds at a time, and those 300 pounds will last me a month, maybe two if I do it right. And that's pennies a day to feed the chickens. For one, at the store, a chicken that size, when you get it at the store, it's gonna be like $20, or probably more. And the free range brown eggs will cost you about $8 at Walmart. So you get the quality of the meat, you get the quality of the eggs for a very small fraction of the price. So it's very beneficial for you to have chickens. It makes sense economically. You just have to have the space, and you have to have the infrastructure in place for you to be able to do that. All right. So that's one of the big things that I teach you here in this podcast. That even if you don't get the chickens right now, even if you only want them when crap hits the fan, you're gonna have to make sure that you have everything for them in place, because you're gonna need the place where they eat from, the where they drink the water. You're gonna have the chicken coop in place. So there's a lot of things that you have to buy for them in order for them to be, okay, for them to have a good environment to live. And again, my chickens, they have a great life. They just walk around, they peck around, they drink whatever they want, they eat whatever they want, and they go up back into the chicken coop when it gets dark. They go in there on their own. Right now we have to chase them because I came and show them to you. But my point is that I'm going to get more. And, they lay eggs every single day, or the brown ones and the white ones do. The Plymouth hasn't really given me any. So I'm going to let her live for now. If my chicken coop gets full from all the other chickens, then that's going to be the first one in line to be processed. But that is what what I want you to take away from this is that there's two breeds that I'm going with. One, the brown one, because it gets me plenty of eggs, really good eggs. And the white one, I think it's Breeze. It's spelled B-R-E-S-S-E. And the breeds are going to be my meat chickens. So when crap hits the fan and I need to feed my alliance, or I need to feed my family, or I need to feed the community, and I have to process chickens, it's going to be the Breeze. All right? I'll be right back. I got to go put them back, or I should let them out. Be right back.
The Man-Made Survival Show.